Well, I'm Kevin Gibbs. I'm a horticulturist with Texas A&M AgriLife, and I have a group of volunteers called Master Gardeners, and usually the Master Gardeners are here talking about bugs, but I'm going to do it today if that's okay with y'all.
Okay.
All right, so there are all kinds of bugs around you every day. Who can tell me about how many different kinds of bugs that you think there might be just in the state of Texas? How many different kinds of bugs?
20?
There's way more than 20. How many do you think there are? There's thousands. How many do you think? No, there's not a million different kinds, but somewhere between 1,000,000 and 1,000. How many? 500. What, last guess.
100,000.
You're pretty close. There's about 30,000 different kinds of insects in the state of Texas. That's not total insects, that's different kinds of insects.
Species?
That's different species, yes. Out of those 30,000 different insects, how many of them do you think actually cause problems for us? Yes, ma'am. How many do you think, right here, how many do you think cause problems? 3? Okay, let's have a guess right here. About 100 is pretty close. So that means there's not a lot of those insects that are causing us problems. Most of them are just flying around minding their own business every day. But we focus on the ones that cause us problems because we consider those to be what? Bad bugs, okay? And the word bug is kind of a collective word. It doesn't necessarily represent all insects. So most of the insects are good. They're just out there doing their thing. It's only a few of them that are bad for us. Do you know anything about an insect's body? What can you tell me about an insect's body? Let's have somebody that hasn't answered anything. It has 3 parts. Do you know what any of those parts are? The head is one of them. Back there. Do you know what that torso area is called?
Abdomen?
The abdomen, okay. And then the abdomen is down here, it's the lower part, and then we have another part where the wings and everything attach. Anybody know what that part's called? Do you?
The legs?
It's called the thorax.
The thorax.
The thorax. So let me show you on this grasshopper. So here you have the head. That one's easy, right? Everything has a head unless it gets chopped off, right? So there's the head, and then here's the abdomen. You remember abdomen because we have an abdomen also. And then you have the thorax. That's where the legs and the wings and everything are attached to. So tell me the parts again. What is this?
Head. Abdomen. Thorax.
Thorax. And what kind of insect is this, by the way?
Grasshopper.
That's a grasshopper. That's right.
That's an invertebrate.
Now, do insects look like this when they're, how do insects change? I mean, do they look like this their whole life? No. You guys are lucky. When you're born, you pretty much look the same most of your life, right? I mean, babies are small, but they stay in the same sort of characteristics their entire life, right? I mean, you don't have to go through any major changes to get to where you're at right now. Would y'all all agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Insects are different though. They have a life pattern, and let's take a look at that life pattern. They go through something that's called metamorphosis. You have the adult. So that's the adult. And the adult's job is to lay some eggs somewhere. Why would an adult need to lay eggs? Loud, please. Do what?
To make more.
To make more, that's right. The adult has to lay eggs because they have to carry the species on. And so the adult finds usually a nice plant and lays the eggs. So then the eggs are there and they hatch, and they are either called nymphs or larvae. And then from there, they go through changes. Now, look at the different things. Do they all look the same, or are they way different looking at each stage? Way different looking at each stage. You can recognize that a baby is at least a human, right? You can recognize that an old person is at least a human. But insects have to go through what's called metamorphosis. Some of them either, it's basically like crawling inside of a box and they sit there and they shed their current skin and they build a new one and then they come back out of the box. It's easy if you think about what butterflies do, right?
Is that a real cocoon?
Yes. So butterflies crawl inside, they make the cocoon, their bodies change, and then they hatch out of the cocoon and they're totally changed, right?
Is that what a real one?
What is a butterfly before it crawls in here and makes the change? Yes, ma'am. A caterpillar, and a caterpillar is a type of what? It's kind of like a worm, right? So would you consider a worm and a caterpillar and a butterfly to be very similar to each other? They don't look very similar, but they do go through major changes. So let's focus on some of these different things. It's real important that you learn to recognize the different stages of an insect. Otherwise, you might think it's a bad bug and you might squish it, okay? So let's take a ladybug, for example. This is officially called a ladybird beetle because it's a type of beetle. You guys recognize what a ladybug looks like, right? Here are the different stages though. You have the adult lays the eggs hatch out as larvae, and then they form a pupate, and then they go back to the adult. So usually the eggs are upside down on the bottom side of a leaf. If you saw that, would you recognize that as a ladybug?
No.
No. So how many of you, your first instinct would be to squish it? But now I'm telling you, you need to learn the different stages of the ladybug because you don't want to squish a good bug, right? And ladybugs are definitely a good bug. Okay, so then it changes from that to that. Does that look a little bit more like a ladybug?
Which is that's whenever they become good blood.
Yeah, that looks a little bit more like a ladybug. Would you still,
Become good blood.
how many of you would still squish that if you saw it? Will you squish it now though?
No.
All right, so, and then it changes back to the adult. What's good about ladybugs is they eat lots of bad insects. They're hungry. Which one of these stages do you think is the hungriest? Would you say it's the egg stage? No. Would you say it's this stage?
Yes.
Or would you say it's that stage?
That stage.
It's actually this stage right here. At this stage, they are voracious. Voracious means they are hungry, hungry, hungry. Have you ever gone home from school and for your afternoon snack and you are hungry, hungry, hungry? At that point, you might say you were voracious, okay? So make sure that you get that. Yes. Will you do me a favor and raise your hand instead of just talking out of, okay. So when we have an insect that does a good thing, we say that that is a beneficial insect. You guys are beneficial sometimes too. Have you ever helped somebody? Have you ever done anything good? That's beneficial. Insects are beneficial whenever they do something that's positive for humans. That's the kind of the perspective that we look at it. Tell me something that an insect might do that is a positive thing towards agriculture or towards humans. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so sometimes they're predators and they eat other insects. What's something else that insects might do that's good for us? They're pollinators. Yes, you're right. So they go out there and they pollinate. So you can just imagine the bee flying around and he lands on the one flower, and what's he trying to do while he's landing on that flower? Let's see, right there. Do you think that's what the bee's actually trying to do? What does the bee want from that flower?
Nectar.
Nectar is right. He's trying to get him something to eat because he's hungry, right?
And it's sweet.
And it's sweet. So they're flying to that flower, they collect some of that nectar, and at the same time, the flower is actually pretty advanced and it's full of pollen. And to get to that nectar, guess what the bee has to go through? He has to go through that layer of pollen, and he brushes up against it. He gets it all on his abdomen, and he flies to the next flower. And when he flies to the next flower, what does he do? He spreads the pollen that he had from the one flower to the next flower, and that's how we have cross-pollination. That's how we have all the pollen spread around. So that's a good thing for us. So here's a few pollinators. Here are some of the different kinds of pollinators. How many of you like wasps? They actually are pollinators. I mean, we don't like wasps because sometimes we get stung by them, right? So for us, that's not necessarily a good thing, but when we think about the fact that they're pollinating other flowers and other plants, it's actually a very good thing. Anybody ever seen these really big moths around the porch light at night? These are pollinators too. These also are bad bugs though, because guess what? They lay those big green caterpillars that eat tomatoes and vegetables and stuff. Anybody ever seen those on your tomatoes? They're big green hornworms. So then we have butterflies. Most people like butterflies, right? Because they don't do what to you? They don't sting you, so they're not a threat to you. So they're considered to be really good. There are some more. Let's look at a couple other things. Let me show you some of the different bad bugs that we have. These are called aphids. Aphids suck the juices out of plants. Mealybugs do the same thing. We have scale. See how they're kind of waxy? They'll suck themselves down to the stem and then they suck the juices out. There is that caterpillar I was just talking about that big moth lays the eggs for. That's called a hornworm. It eats all kinds of stuff. Then we have whiteflies, and we have a leaf-footed bug. That's a boll weevil. We don't have boll weevils here anymore. And then grasshoppers. How many of you would consider a grasshopper to be a bad thing? Grasshoppers eat a lot of stuff, and when they're in big swarms, sometimes they're referred to as locusts, but they're not truly a locust. Let's talk about spiders for a second. Is a spider a bug? No, it's not a bug. Somebody count the number of legs on this for me right quick. How many legs do you see? Y'all can all just blurt it out. 6, okay. Now look at the spider. How many legs do you see? 8. So they're definitely different. So you'll know that it's an insect if it has how many legs? 6, and it has what 3 parts?
Head, abdomen,
and the thorax. So spiders are definitely not insects, but we group them in with good bugs because they do good things for us. How many of you like for spiders to crawl on you? You do? Ooh, how many of you are freaked out by spiders? Okay, so here's what I can tell you. Most spiders are really good. You don't have to worry about them. If they're in your way, you just take the broom and you knock the web down and they'll crawl off and build their web somewhere else. There are a few spiders that you need to be aware of though. This is a black widow. Black widows, for you, luckily for you, they're generally in dark places and they don't generally get in the same areas that you do. But if you see black widows, you need to let your mom or dad know so they can do something about it, okay? You stay away from them. This is a good spider. Yeah, they build huge webs and sometimes they're pretty big, but it's a very good spider. This one is called a brown recluse. Have you? Okay, they're generally in dark places too, so you must have been crawling around in some place you shouldn't have been. Anyway, so spiders, most of the time you're going to do what about them? Go ahead.
tell your parents or
If they're, that's probably the best thing. Or get your parent to knock the web down so they'll crawl on somewhere else. All right, so I'm about out of time. Let's see if you know what some of these are. What is this called?
praying mantis.
You can just blurt it out, it's fine. Praying mantis, is it an insect?
Yes.
Because it has
6 legs.
6 legs, very good. What is this one?
Fly.
It's a fly, is it an insect?
Yes.
Okay, very good. What is this one?
A scorpion.
Is it an insect?
No.
It has how many legs?
8.
Okay. This one,
Grasshopper.
is it an insect?
Yes.
All right, so y'all, I think y'all have figured it out. Even something like this, you might not know exactly what it is, but can you tell me if it's an insect or not?
Yes.
Yes, it is, and it does have a head, an abdomen, and a thorax. All right, well, thank y'all very much for learning about insects with me today, and we want to thank y'all for coming out, and I hope you're having fun and enjoying yourself.